Welcome to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, host and owner of the Kelly Mental Health Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization based in Thunder Bay, Ontario, helping people to be the best versions of themselves. I'm here today with Marianne Wylie. Marianne is a registered social worker, and she recently wrote an article that I'd love to talk to her about. So welcome, Marianne.
Thanks, Linda.
Can you tell us about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a registered social worker. I specialize in mental health and addictions and some experience in trauma. So I've kind of developed my career over in mental health, going to school for social work. I got my master's in social work, my degree in women and gender studies, and yeah, I've just always had a fascination for the human mind and how that influences how we interact with others and how we feel about ourselves. So
it is really fascinating. And
yeah.
I often say I like to nerd it up about this stuff because a lot of times even in interviews with people, we just kind of get excited about it. It's like, oh, look at how this connection makes so much sense. And so I love that part of it. Now, your experience as well has been quite variable, right? Like the different areas that you've worked in.
Yeah.
So could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I started off in the violence against women sector. That was kind of my passion, going to college for social work at the time, and then I had the opportunity to work, do my placement, and then later work in an organization that specialized in mental health in London, Ontario. And although I was working with women, I also had the opportunity to learn about serious mental illness, like bipolar and schizophrenia, and working with people who are struggling with that. And then I very quickly learned, early on in my career, I was fortunate to learn the interrelationship between addictions, mental health, and trauma, and to not overlook any one of them, that they all interact in some way, while it may not be for absolutely everyone, but for a lot of people it does. And so that's where my career started. And then I just always kind of stuck in mental health. After my master's, I was fortunate to obtain a position at an outpatient addictions program in Hamilton, and I fell in love with that as well. So I just kind of always stayed in mental health. Just had some experience in working with trauma as well as addictions, and mental health being part of that. So I'm fortunate to have the trio of experiences. So
wow, that's incredible. That's a tough job. They always say that working with mental health and addictions is one of the most difficult. So I want to talk to you about this article that you wrote, and it's called Falling Madly in Love with Yourself.
Yeah.
So what interested you in that topic?
It's hard to think back and think exactly what was the moment that made me think, maybe I need to write about this. But the big thing about what interests me in that, and what it's really all about, is self-compassion and self-esteem, improving both. And that, I think, is a big part of what people struggle with when they come in to see me for therapy. And with whatever it is that they're coming to see me for, a big part of it is low self-esteem or being too hard on yourself. So I got to thinking about that, and we do, like, when I say we, I mean like we do in our job, and we talk a lot about self-esteem and ways of improving that. And sometimes people will come in and they'll have it's awesome, they have the self-awareness that, my self-esteem's low, I need to work on that, which is great that they have the awareness. I'm finding that people sometimes struggle with, okay, but how do I do that? What's needed? Mm-hmm. And so I got to thinking, and I thought, okay, well, we need to love ourselves. We need to acknowledge who we are and accept that and be happy and have some peace in that.
Right.
Yeah.
The low self-esteem piece, I think people struggle with because I do hear that people will often think that low self-esteem itself is the issue. Like, I was just born with low self-esteem.
Right.
But that's not really right, though, is it?
Self-esteem is something that's learned through experiences. So, and it could be experiences at home, it could be experiences out of the home, such as in school and that. But self-esteem, well, let's define what it is. Self-esteem is what you think and how you feel about yourself. And that is very much acquired through different life experiences that you've had growing up, or even in adulthood as well. Things, if you've been put down, or you maybe haven't succeeded or failed in various things, like in school, you've tried hard, yet you still were struggling in school, or you couldn't make the team on a sports team, or you had a parent that was struggling, maybe with mental health or addictions, and there was a lot of emphasis put on you taking care of things. Whatever the experience was, there are various experiences that can make us think that we're not as important as others, or we need to put others ahead of ourselves, or that we're not enough or not good enough or not as worthy as someone else. And that's what self-esteem is.
Why do you think that some people end up with low self-esteem and some don't, going through very similar circumstances?
That's a good question. There's a lot of factors that play into that. A lot of it has to do also with resilience. So there's many opportunities for resilience. So having a supportive person or a caregiver that kind of builds that self-esteem within yourself, or even just having the awareness. Some people recognize as growing up, or whether as a teenager, as a young child, or in adulthood, recognizing that, well, maybe my environment doesn't define who I am, and they start challenging that for themselves. Different experiences, peers. So although there could be different experiences that can affect someone's self-esteem in a negative way, it could also do so in a positive way. And life isn't black and white, so it often is both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very complex. But
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose it really varies with the individual and what they have going for them, what's kind of working against them. And
absolutely.
So anyway, if someone does end up with lower self-esteem, it affects your life in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
What are some ways that people can be held back by that low self-esteem? Feeling not caring about themselves as much, or not thinking much of themselves.
Like, what are some barriers to improving self-esteem, or
How do you think it affects people?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think, does it hold them back?
It often affects mental wellness. So a big part of what ends up happening is, and not always, but sometimes, is people might be struggling with interpersonal relationships, or they're having experiences where they're feeling overwhelmed because they're not taking care of their needs, and having some downtime, or doing some self-care.
Right, because they won't think enough of themselves to actually go and do these things.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Sometimes it leads to other things, or not leads to, but maybe has a relationship with mental health issues like depression or anxiety, addictions as well. Yeah.
Right, that needing to escape because you're feeling probably so rotten most of the time that you're just kind of looking for any kind of rush that makes you feel better.
Yeah.
Right, so it can really impact lots of parts of a person's life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how someone can move forward in falling further in love with themselves. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, and I'm here today with Marianne Wylie. So we were just talking about self-esteem, low self-esteem, how that develops, how it holds people back in life. But what I really want to get back to is, in your article, one of the points that stood out as an idea for how to fall further in love with yourself and raise your self-esteem is to take yourself out on a date. Now that is a terrifying prospect to someone that maybe has low self-esteem, but I would say for anybody, it's not something you'd usually see.
Yeah, it is different. It totally takes you outside of the comfort zone, even just the thought of it. I think some people, when I bring up the idea, or even when I first thought of it, I kind of felt that, like, oh my God, this is nuts. But it was cool. And how I came up with the idea is just thinking about, okay, well, how do we, okay, if I'm going to try and get to know myself a little more, which is part of how to fall in love with yourself, how to build that connection with yourself, is getting to know yourself. And I think that's really the key. And this idea of taking yourself on a date is really just one way of doing that. So I was thinking, well, how do we get to know others when, let's say, we're single and meeting potential partners? Especially in urban settings, we tend to go out on a date. We get to know them. We go out for coffee, we go out for dinner, we go for a walk, we go to the movies, whatever it is. And when we do that, we ask them what they like. We ask them what they don't like. We might try to do an activity that they like that we've never tried. And in that process, we get to know what we like as well. So I thought, well, how can we apply that to ourselves? Like, how can I apply that to myself to get to know myself a little more? So then I thought of, well, I don't want to be restricted on the idea of going out to eat dinner by myself for the fear of like, oh, that'd be weird. So just do it. And so, although it's easier said than done, I get.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going in my mind. And taking yourself out just yourself, going to the movies on your own if you want to go see a movie, going to eat at your favorite restaurant, going for a walk along the beach and just taking in the scenery, and not necessarily needing to have a person there, but absorbing that and asking yourself in the process, oh, I like this or I don't like this, or what do I like, or what are some things about myself that,
that you didn't know before, right? That's true, because if you take yourself out and you're asking yourself those questions, it's so different from being with a person where I think we have that tendency to want to please. And so it's never so much about, am I enjoying this? It's, are they enjoying this? And what can I do to help make them more comfortable?
Yeah.
Whereas I think what you're talking about is taking yourself on a well-intentioned outing, and then being able to go through those things, almost being that advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Do I really like Thai food? I mean, do I really like walking outside? But then, because a lot of times I think we tend to be sort of absorbed with ourselves. Maybe I've been that person on a date that didn't think to ask the person I was with, do you actually like this? So then you're doing that for yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really neat. So why do you think people are so afraid to be seen doing things on their own?
The fear of judgment, the worry that it's going to be perceived in a negative way or weird, or that, I think that's a big thing. It's worried that it's going to be seen as weird, that it's going to be seen as judged in a negative way. Maybe there's that worry that, okay, well, if I go sit at this table alone and there's other people around, at their tables, are they going to be looking at me and making assumptions about why I'm alone and judging me for that? And I think sometimes that's part of it, is the worry that others are going to judge you in a negative way for whatever you're doing alone, right, out in public. And then perhaps even the worry that people, I guess I'm kind of dipping into something else here, but kind of related is the worry that, okay, well, am I going to be seen as selfish? Like, I left the kids with their father or whoever, and I'm going to take myself out to dinner because I just need some time to myself and I want to get to know myself a little more. And is that seen as selfish? Am I selfish for doing that? And so I think the worry about what other people are thinking is definitely that big, the big thing that kind of makes a person kind of feel about it.
Wow, that's really interesting, because that's a big difference from the, they're going to think I'm weird, versus, no, the people are going to think that I'm selfish. And I think that's got to be a huge barrier for a lot of people, that that concern that they'll be seen as selfish if they're taking care of themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing that's kind of cool when you look online now and people are are talking about self-care, and that it's healthy and good to take care of yourself and do what you need to take care of yourself. Sometimes we're even trying to reframe the word selfish and to say, well, it's okay to be selfish and take care of yourself. I want to break that down just a little bit, because the word selfish is so hard to kind of break away from, and I think selfish tends to mean doing something for yourself that's good for you at the expense of others, when really it's more about self-care and getting to know yourself, and it doesn't have to be at the expense of someone else.
Right.
And that's what building your compassion for yourself, building your self-esteem for yourself is about. Is that you're not doing so, you're not putting someone down by doing that. You are taking care of yourself, and that's good and that's healthy, and that builds a better you to take, so that you're then more rejuvenated to go home and take care of the kids, or to be less triggered by whatever might be triggering you in a relationship or at work or wherever, and you're more yourself, you're more calm, you're more at peace.
Right. So you're really doing not only a favor for yourself, you're doing it for the benefit of everybody around you.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do these things, you're probably going to work yourself to the bone. You're going to be, not as present. You're going to be maybe more resentful of the people around you that need you, because you're tired.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's giving yourself that permission that, hey, I'm just as worthy, there's that self-esteem piece, I'm just as worthy as everyone else in this world. We're all equal. So it's okay for me to do this for myself. It's okay. And by doing that, I model it to my parents, or my siblings, or my friends, that, it's good to take care of yourself. And, I'm gonna spend a couple hours just doing this for me. And then I teach my children that, hey, it's good to take care of yourself. And look, mommy's doing that. I'm modeling this. Yeah.
Wow, that's huge, that piece, especially if we are trying to sit there and fight these negative assumptions that they're going to think I'm weird. Because if you're open with your family or the people around you about the fact, you know what, I am going to take care of myself. And you know what happened because of it? I slept better, I was happier, I did everything I needed to do the next day. And then they see that this works. And then they know that you're not going to think they're weird if they do it.
Yeah, exactly. You challenge this, wherever this worry of what people, whatever the judgment is, whatever your worry of what someone is going to think about you for doing this, by acting it, you challenge it. And you challenge it for yourself, you challenge it for others, and you make it okay.
And it's so important too, I think, just knowing that there are benefits to doing this, and the benefits a lot of times outweigh the risks. We tend to blow up the risks a little bit. We catastrophize of, so what if some strangers think I'm weird? Maybe I don't want to be their friend either. So there's a lot of stuff in there. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're just going to talk a little bit more about self-compassion. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, and I'm here with Marianne Wylie, and we're talking a lot about self-compassion, self-esteem, and how to fall in love with yourself. Hi again.
Hi, Linda.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was just that self-compassion piece. So one of the things that we use in therapy sometimes is, people are beating themselves up, and they're saying, I can't do this, and I suck at this, and I'm a failure at this, and we'll use the compassion exercise of, imagine all these things as being said by your best friend. What would you say to that person?
Yeah.
So why do you think it's so easy for us to be compassionate towards others, but not towards ourselves?
That's a good question. We're often taught to focus on other people, right? Perhaps it's uncomfortable. So there's many different reasons. Perhaps it's uncomfortable to focus on ourselves. Part of it, I think, too, is when I look within myself, it's way more abstract. Like I'm not looking at myself in the mirror, right? I'm feeling the emotions that are connected to my thoughts, and it's all feels like a jumble sometimes, and it's hard to really kind of see it. Sometimes it's hard to see when you're in the middle of whatever you're experiencing, or compared to if you're at a distance and observing it. Like me talking to you, I might be able to recognize perhaps something that you're saying, and you may not see it right away because you're focused on what you're intending on saying, or how you're feeling while you're saying it. And
so we have just too much information.
Yeah,
right?
Sometimes that's what it is.
If it's coming from us, we're wrapped up in that complexity of the feelings, the emotions, the past that influenced it, the person that told you weren't good enough, all of these things. Meanwhile, your friend would go, just do the thing.
Yeah.
So that being sort of outside of yourself, you can be a little more objective.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So, and it's probably just crazy making for many of us, that because I think a lot of us even know this. We know that I can be completely open and kind to another person, and yet I call myself the worst of the worst. Like, isn't that awful?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that you also talk about in not only this article, but other articles you've written, is the concept of boundaries, and then how that connects to people are going to think I'm selfish.
Right.
So boundaries are, I would say, one of the hardest things, one of the things that I struggle with the most, because I'm a yes person. I'm like, someone tells me, hey, let's go do this interesting thing. I'm like, yes, okay, cool. But I don't think about all the time it's going to take, and then I become resentful.
Right.
So why is it necessary to set boundaries and to, as you say, protect your peace?
Yeah. Setting boundaries preserves our mental wellness in a few different ways, and that's what it's all about. It's about preserving your own, how you are, and modeling to someone else that I've got a limit on what I can do, and that's okay. And so, for instance, letting a family member know that who would typically call you at any time of the day or night, that after 9 o'clock, I just want some quiet time, and I'm gonna, and it's my time before bed, so I'm not gonna answer the phone. Whatever the boundary might be, you be transparent. You let them know, and by setting that boundary, you are taking care of yourself. It gives me permission then to take care of myself within whatever it is that I'm going to do. Whether maybe I'm just going to relax, watch TV, maybe, I don't know. But I recognize that I've got that worth. It's okay for me to do that. And it lets them know that, hey, you know what? She recognizes her limits. She recognizes what she needs, and that's great, because then that makes it okay. Maybe I can do that too, or not. Not everyone will take it like that, but that's okay too. But it still kind of puts it out there, and it helps you. It gives yourself the permission that, hey, I'm okay, and I deserve to do this for myself, and by acting on those kinds of things to help us feel better, we tend to feel better. Our self-esteem, our confidence goes up, right?
And then how do we react to it, or how do we handle it if someone then crosses that boundary?
Yeah, that's the hard part, because often people will try to push the boundaries a bit, and most times people don't realize that they are, especially if, let's say, for example, I struggled with boundaries myself. I still do at times. That's part of the reason I'm so passionate about it, is because I realize how healthy it can, how much it can kind of create wellness for a person, not just for myself, but other people I've seen. And especially if you've come from a place where you haven't really ever set boundaries, or you really struggled to, and you're working at it. Once you start setting those boundaries with others, some people might kind of be like, what's going on? And some people might push, some people might respect it, some people might push it. And so how do you do that? How do you keep enforcing it? It could be directly just repeating, okay, I see, you might validate how they're feeling. Okay, I get you want to chat with me. Let's make a time to chat after 9 o'clock. I'm not answering the phone. And then it's important to follow through on what you say you're gonna do. So then if the person then calls me at 9:30, I'm not gonna answer the phone.
Wow. And that's really difficult, I think, to not only to set that boundary, but to enforce it.
Yeah.
Because I think we fear, oh, they're going to hate us, or they're going to think we're mean. But the other thing that the other sort of perspective that I came across was that it's not their discomfort and their emotions that we're worried about. It's our own discomfort of them being upset.
Yeah, yeah. And part of what I think sometimes helps with that is just detaching a little bit from that person. I think sometimes especially when we struggle with setting boundaries, sometimes we feel so connected, or we might personalize their emotional reactions as like, oh, something that, oh, I feel it too. I feel so empathic for what they're feeling that I'm responsible for them feeling that way, therefore I need to fix that. And sometimes it's about just kind of distancing a little bit and be like, okay, no, that's an emotional reaction that person's having. Although it's related to an interaction that we've had, I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and what they're feeling, and I don't need to carry that. It gives them the opportunity to take care of themselves, to take care of whatever it is that they're going through. It doesn't mean I need to be cold about it. Like I can still be validating, like, you feel hurt that I set this boundary, or it feels hard, it feels dismissing, and I need to take care of myself. We can still make time at a different time.
Some of the most empowering things I've ever heard in regards to this are never apologize and never explain. That was actually from White Oleander, a really, really amazing book.
Yeah.
But that was very helpful for me, even as a person that had trouble setting boundaries, because it just then for me came down to, I don't need to explain myself. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm taking care of myself. This is not selfish. It is self-sustaining.
Yeah, I like that word, self-sustaining. You are sustaining your wellness, you're sustaining yourself for whatever it is you have to carry in this life. And you keep yourself well, you prevent burnout, you prevent feelings of overwhelm, and yeah, you sustain yourself.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this really important subject. I'm sure we could talk for many, many hours about it.
There's a lot to talk about. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.